Nation. This is Becca.
Hey, wait a second. No. You're not the host. You're not the host of the Forged in Blue podcast. Oh, sorry about that, Colts Nation. Sometimes it gets just a touch crazy in the Burton house, especially after a season-ending loss for our Indianapolis Colts. But good morning, Colts Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the Forged in Blue podcast. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Burton, not the one who spoke earlier. That's my daughter, Becca. And on today's episode, we're going to recap the season-ending 27-24 loss to the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to give you my end-of-the-season awards for my Dagum Players of the Year. Next up, Twitter time. Y'all had a ton of questions about the game, about the offseason. It's going to be really interesting to kind of work our way through these during this episode. And finally, I'm going to give you a quick look ahead to the biggest questions entering the offseason for the Indianapolis Colts. What do we do at quarterback? Now that Costanzo has officially retired, what are we doing at left tackle? How are we building more edge rush? We're going to try to kind of give you a little taste of that on what we're going to do during the offseason. As always, you can find this on all the areas you listen to your pods. I ask you guys to please rate, review, subscribe, and share. So without further ado, let's fire it up. Jump on in. Okay, Colts Nation, let's jump on into this game. I mean, as heartbreaking as it is that it's done, that there's such finality to an NFL season. I was explaining to my wife the other day, we were talking about it, and I said, it's tough because just like that, the season's done, you don't see your team play again for 7 months. So there's such finality that, that's why I like to take a little bit of time between the end of the game on Saturday and dropping this today. So let's kind of dive in. The reason that it's so difficult is when you look at the overall kind of recap of this game, the Colts dominated kind of across the board. If you were to look just at stats, you would be sitting there going, man, the Colts came out of Orchard Park with a W. I mean, listen to some of these stats. First downs, Colts had 17. Oh, I'm sorry. The Colts had 22. Buffalo had 17. Out first down them. Total plays, Colts had 76, Buffalo had 58. Total yards, Colts had 472, Buffalo had 397. Total rushing yards, Colts had 163, Buffalo had 96. And I know what you guys are going to say with that is that Buffalo is not known for really running the ball. A huge chunk of that came from Josh Allen scrambling and a couple designed runs. But even then, the Colts did outpass them as well. Not by much, by probably 5 yards. Time of possession. Colts dominated that too, 34 minutes to 25. Sacks, Colts got 2, including one of the fumbles that just took a weird bounce, and they couldn't get on top of it. And that could have been a game-changing kind of play. Buffalo had 0. So you're looking at these stats, and you're like, man, how on earth do the Colts lose this game? And it comes down to, about 4 different things. You just had these costly mistakes and mistimed mistakes in general. You had Hot Rod, who has been very stable when it comes inside 45 yards, doinking a 33-yarder. I mean, that would have put you up, I think it would have been 13-7 at the time. And so you've got that. And then let's just jump into this real quick. You've got the 3rd and 4th and goal down there in the end zone to end the first half, and a lot of people are just ripping Frank Reich about this call. And I mean, you listen across the board. Yeah, a buddy of mine texted me during the game and said, should they have taken the points? And I mean, in my heart, you're kind of like, yeah, but at the same time, it makes a ton of sense. You go for it. You're trying to be ultra aggressive. They went for 4 fourth downs this game and got 2 of them, 50%. They're one of the teams in the NFL who go for the 4th down the most. So it's not shocking when he decides to go for it. And on top of that, if you don't get it, you're banking on your, otherworldly defense to not allow Buffalo to drive 98 yards before the half, under 2 minutes, and get a touchdown. And they didn't do that. So, I mean, I'm not going to kill him, Y'all know, you listen to me, y'all know I love Frank Wright. He's 28-20 as a head coach. He's been to the playoffs 2 out of 3 years. He's had 3 different starting quarterbacks in 3 years. I mean, the dude is legit. And I think a great stat, and I don't have it in front of me, is that he has coached in his 3 years 3 of the top 10 all-time offensive Colts teams, like yardage wise and points wise. He's coached 3 of the top 10 in these 3 years with 3 different starting quarterbacks. I mean, give the guy a little bit of credit, give the guy a little bit of slack. If he had made the fourth down, he would have been a genius. Everyone would have been like, oh, it makes so much sense. But because he missed it, Monday morning quarterback rips him to shreds. The fourth down call is not the one I think that a lot of people have an issue with. It was the third down call. You know, you have Jonathan Taylor, and y'all know how much I love Jonathan Taylor, and you don't run him up the middle. But then you hear afterwards, and you hear a little bit more, and you start to learn a little bit more. And as a fan in the moment, you're really upset with that play. You're trying to figure out why the heck wouldn't you just pound him up the middle, 2 straight plays, and see what you get. But then you start hearing it, and you hear the interview with Frank after the game, and you hear him say, they did self scouting, and they scored 1 touchdown on outside the number runs all season, and they knew Buffalo knew that. So it was a good call. And then you look too, and this is what I love. I was listening to Colts Brawl this morning, and they were talking about it. And the play, you put Zach Pascal in motion away from the heavy side to try to draw that corner to the other side to get the matchup you want, which was 1-on-1. You had 3 on 2 with the offensive lineman, and you were expecting JT to make somebody miss or to run over. If you got a head of steam and you're in a corner, Taylor's going to win that battle 9 times out of 10. The issue was that the corner pointed to the safety and said, pick up Pascal. I'm staying home. And, that's just good coaching. Like the best thing I heard all day after the game was from Colts Brawl that we got to remember, dude, the other guys are getting paid too. They're getting paid to make plays too. Not just the players, but the coaches. And the coaches, that was well coached. They knew what they were doing, and it's not even outsmarting Frank in that position. They just called the perfect play, and they knew what they were doing. If he had drifted to the other side, who knows? JT may plow somebody. He may get in the end zone. But it didn't happen because Buffalo was well coached, and they knew what they were supposed to do in that play. So they caught him for the loss. I think the only part of the fourth down that you second guess is that when you lose those yards and you back up and it's 4th and goal from the 5, you really limit your playbook, and that leads to the next, glaring thing that you see is, a handful of drops, probably 5 or 6 throughout the game. I mean, as great as Pittman was, and y'all know too, I love Michael Pittman, and I think he's come a long way this year. He had some costly drops. Some were slightly behind him. That one in the end zone on the 4th and goal was just out of his reach. He got caught in a little bit of traffic across the middle, trying to get across the middle, and he just couldn't reach it. But at the same time, in the interview after the game, he said, "That's a ball I have to catch. That's a ball I have to catch. I'm going to work this offseason to make sure that doesn't happen again," which you have to love as a Colts fan. I mean, you heard that across the board from the players. Darius Leonard saying, "You're gonna feel this, and I'm gonna work harder this offseason than I've ever worked." So, and you hear that from Michael Pittman too. So you got to love that. But you had those costly drops, and then you had Naheem, who never drops the ball, looking ahead, and it doinks off his shoulder pad, and you don't pick up that. You have Jonathan Taylor, who, yet again, I love and has been really productive all season in the passing game as well, dropping 2 balls. You've got Pascal just out of reach on the last one. You had just this calamity of just errors that you can't have when you're facing the hottest team in the NFL. We talked about it in the last pod. 9 of 10 going into the game. Could have been 10 of 10. Top 2 scoring offense in the league and a top 3 MVP candidate at quarterback. You can't make those mistakes. And on top of it, extremely well coached. Sean McDermott is an extremely good coach. So, it's one of those things where you have to feel somewhat good that you played your best game, but you have to feel bad too because you beat yourself. In the end, the box scores are going to show that Buffalo won, but at the same time, and you don't want to take anything away from Buffalo, but at the same time, the Colts did everything they could to not win this game. And I think that's the biggest disappointment coming out of this game. All right, that noise right there means we are going to take a quick time out, and I'm going to talk to you guys about a very special sponsor of mine, Anchor Podcast. Let me explain, you guys. Anchor Podcast is the best way for you to start podcasting today. One of the coolest things about it is free. It doesn't cost you a cent, a dime, a nickel, a dollar. It doesn't cost anything for you to do it. It's really cool too because they have creation tools right inside the app that you download that let you edit your podcast right from your home computer or your cell phone, which is fantastic because I don't know about you guys, but I'm always on my cell phone. You can jumpstart it there, then you can go over and you can edit it on your computer. Anchor not only will do all this, they'll also distribute your podcast to all the big platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Breaker, Pocket Cast, whatever you could think of, you can do it. Not only can you do this, not only can you get it out to other people, you can get paid for doing this, you guys. Podcast through Anchor, no minimum listenership, get paid. It's super important. If you guys want to do this and you want to be able to make your own podcast, it's super important for you to go right now, go to the Apple Market, go to the Google Play Store, whatever you've got, download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm and you can get started podcasting today. You can get out what you want to say right now. All you have to do is go and download now. Guys, I'm a little sad at this next segment because this is the last Dagum Player of the Week of this season. So it's actually going to be the Dagum Player of the Year. So I've got three of them that I want to highlight for this season. You could highlight a ton. You could highlight Julian Blackmon and how he's come along, Michael Pittman and how he progressed and developed. But I've got three. Y'all know the first one. It's easy to guess. It's my man, Jonathan Taylor. On the year, Jonathan Taylor had 232 carries, about 1,100 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Y'all know we've talked about the stats. We've talked about kind of the rarefied air that he's in regards to that among Colts rookies. Marshall Faulk, Edgerrin James, the only other Colts rookie running backs to post those kind of stats, along with a 5-yard per carry average. So we've kind of talked about that. He also had 479 yards after contact. So, I mean, he's getting hit in the backfield a little bit, and he's able to kind of shake that off. We saw that in the Buffalo game this past weekend. We saw his ability. I mean, they stopped him in the hole. He kind of jerked his leg out, and he picked up, 5-7 yards out of that run. It was ridiculous to see. So, I mean, he did all this, you guys, as a rookie, playing only 47% of the snaps. That's per Pro Football Reference, which is insane. So he rushed for 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns on 47% of the snaps. It's crazy. It's crazy to me that he was able to do that because it's well documented. We've talked about it on this pod. It's been talked about on other pods that he had kind of a touch and go beginning to the season, but really came on, and the future is so bright for him in regards to what he's going to be able to do. It's really put in perspective on, are they going to bring Marlon Mack back? I think Marlon is an amazing leader in the locker room, and he's an amazing running back. He is coming off a torn Achilles, which worries you, but did he make him obsolete? Because there's only so many balls, One of the funniest things I've seen all the time is on Speak for Yourself when they're doing the commercial and they count. It's like 1, 2, 3. No, there's only one ball. And you've got Jonathan Taylor, Naheem Hines. You've got several people who need touches, and it's going to be really interesting. And Marlon Mack would need touches. So, I mean, that's a huge question. The craziest stat that I was able to find for him for this pod was that he was 8th in the league in rushing attempts with 232. But he still did that, and he placed 3rd in total rushing yards. I mean, so you're not talking about he was getting this exorbitant amount of carries and he just wore it down to 1,000 yards. Kind of reminiscent of Frank Gore from a few years ago, where he just kind of wore it down. He had so many carries and he was able to hit that 1,000 yard mark. Now, he did it on the eighth most carries in the NFL, which is crazy to me. So, I mean, the question was always floated out at the beginning of the year. Did trading up for him, did they pay too much? And did they draft a running back too high? I think we saw at the tail end of this year, we saw him come on. We saw that was not the case. Ballard hit on this pick, you guys, and it makes you feel so confident in that position going forward. And it's good for whoever that quarterback's going to be, whether it be Rivers, Eason, Darnold. I don't think it's going to be Wentz anymore. I've loved that one, but news broke yesterday with that, and we'll kind of touch on that later. Whoever's going to be there, having Taylor in the backfield is a massive benefit for them. So that leads me to the next Dagum player of the year. It's Phillip Rivers. I mean, I don't know what our expectations were for him coming in. As Colts fans, it's always been really hard this entire season to get your arms around Phillip Rivers and Colt Blue. I think a ton of it just has to do with the history that was there, him having a really good record against our Colts, him jawing with the fans at Lucas Oil, him knocking the Colts out of the playoffs a couple of times. It was really hard to kind of get your arms around him as the quarterback for your team. Plus, he's 39, he's immobile, he's not really what you want in the modern day NFL. But all he did this year, you guys, was complete 68% of his passes, 4,100 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 11 picks. He cut his picks in half from last year. That was a huge worry going into this season. He threw 20 plus picks last year. Were you going to get that turnover machine? And he did cost a couple games, but I would like to make it very well known that he did not lose the game against Buffalo. He didn't. Did he have a couple misplaced throws? Yes, but he was surgical in that game. He was able to just pick apart that Buffalo defense for the most part. So, I mean, he came in, and I think there was a lot of worry about the whole situation and what was going to take place and how he was going to be. And I think he proved a lot of people wrong. He proved a lot of people wrong. He came in, he revamped his career. And now the huge question that we're going to touch on later in this pod and in the offseason is what's going to happen with next year. He was super emotional after the game. It makes you wonder, is that just the emotions of losing a playoff game, emotions of possibly retiring? No one really knows. But all I know, you guys, is that he did what he was paid to do. He's paid $25 million to increase the offensive output at the quarterback position. And he did. And I love Jacoby, but he was light years better than Jacoby this year as opposed to last year. He was able to put the ball in places and take risk and make big plays. He did what the Colts paid him to do, which leads me to the final daggum player of the year, and it's DeForest Buckner. The Colts paid big for Buckner in the offseason, giving up the 13th pick and paying him like $25 million, $23 million a year. It's the highest paid defensive tackle only behind Aaron Donald, I believe. And he did everything. He was exactly what Ballard wanted. He was the 3 tech that drove the D. He was just amazing to watch all season. He had 9.5 sacks, 58 tackles at the D tackle position. Set a franchise record with that. 26 QB hits on top of the 9.5 sacks. And y'all, he did all this playing a career low 73% of the snaps because he was dinged up, he was hampered, and then he missed the game with COVID. So, I mean, he lived up 100% to the expectations and to what they gave up for him. There's no doubt that he did. He did everything that you expected and more. He completely changed the defense. Y'all have heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. Ballard looks for freakish ability, but he also looks for game-changing, franchise-making players, and that is what DeForest Buckner is. And he did it, and to me, he just completely changed the culture of the defense. He freed up so many other players to get rushes on the QB. He freed up the linebackers to play in space, which then freed up the corners and the safeties to make plays in the secondary. He did everything, and you saw it in the game he was out against the Titans. We were not the same. So, I mean, I feel really, really good when it comes to the future, and he's young all of these guys, except for Rivers, are young. There's so many young players on the Colts defense and offense that were playing in that game against Buffalo that got much needed experience, and they got the heartache from the game that they should have won and they didn't. Y'all, the future is so bright. I'm so pumped to do this segment next year because who knows how many daggum players of the week I'm going to be able to list. I mean, the list is just bountiful and plentiful in my mind because of the way this team plays. But coming out of this year, I've got to give it to my three players. I have to give it to Jonathan Taylor. And you got to give it to DeForest Buckner. Defo was ridiculous. And in the end, you have to give your props to Phillip Rivers, whether you want him to come back or whether you ever wanted him here. He did what he was paid to do. Now, the whole question leading after that, we're going to discuss later. But those three guys are my daggum players of the year. Oh, yeah, y'all know what that means. It is Twitter time. So we're going to just jump into this because I got a decent amount of questions. We got a lot of stuff to go over today. So, first, right off the top rope, my man Vinny from Ontario. He sent me a DM and he goes, I have to start by saying I love that Ed Dodds declined all interviews. That's good news for Colts. Chances are he'll be back. So, you're Ballard, me, sitting at 21. You need wide receiver, edge, left tackle, and corner. What do you do in the draft? And do you sign any outside free agents to fill the voids? P.S. You can make trade scenarios in the draft. So, Vinny, as of this, we know Dodd did not decline all interviews. He is going uh, to interview with the Lions, and that's a little touchy one because he's very close to Robert Saleh, who is the leading candidate for the head coach. So we'll see with that. But in regards to if I'm Ballard, which I wish I was sometimes, not really right now because he's got a lot of decisions to make. But if I'm Ballard, I'm sitting at 21. I need wide receiver, edge, left tackle, and corner. I'm going left tackle 9 times out of 10 at this point because, as we know, as of the 12th, Anthony Costanzo officially retired from the NFL, which didn't shock, I think, anybody. It didn't shock me. I talked about it on this podcast. He wavered. He's a different kind of cat, man. He's spending summers out in Silicon Valley. He's kind of like Andrew Luck. And then he had that kind of gruesome end of the season ankle injury that caused him to have surgery. He was questioning last year, so it's not a huge shock that he walked away. I'm going left tackle. I'm going left tackle 9 times out of 10. I think the only other one that I would consider out of the ones that you sent me, and it's not even in there, is maybe jump up for a quarterback if you feel like he is the guy. As far as signing any outside free agents, I think wide receivers where you probably look at that. You hear Allen Robinson a lot. You hear Galladay. They're kind of high ticket ones. He might go after someone like that. But again, I kind of like the talent that's there. I like Michael Pittman. I think you bring back T.Y. Hilton. I like if Paris Campbell can stay healthy. I think he's good. DeMichael Harris showed flashes. I mean, I like the wide receiver room. You could add some depth. I don't know if you're going to spend big in free agency, and I don't think you're going to draft high a player of that caliber. So, I mean, great question, Vinny. As always, man, you always send in great questions. Keep them coming. Next up is Milano. I hope I pronounced it right, man. I'm so sorry if I didn't. Twitter handle is at Lucky LUCKI_boy BOI 215. And he said, should the Colts bring back Xavier Rhodes or Justin Houston, or maybe re-sign both? I'm looking, if I had to pick between the two, I'm going Xavier Rhodes, lockdown corner, much younger, closer to his prime, kind of just out of it. Justin Houston, he flashed it still this year. He's a great leader in the locker room, but he kind of tailed off. So, I mean, if you're asking me, I mean, obviously, I think Justin Houston's probably going to come cheaper because of his age and because of Xavier Rhodes' position. But I think if you were asking me, I'd bring back Xavier Rhodes. So great question, man. Next up is Brandon Gibson, man. He sends them in to me. Fantastic. Um, Big question he had, it's kind of null and void now, was about Jared Veldier. getting extended. He actually got signed off of the Colts roster as of the recording of this pod. He's actually playing for the Packers this weekend, so he's not getting an extension with the Colts. But the other question he had was in regards to free agency. Would I go Kenny Galladay or Allen Robinson? I think across the board, everyone really likes Allen Robinson, but he's going to cost a lot of money. And yeah, we have a lot of money, but we actually still have, Quentin Nelson's coming up. He's getting his 5th-year option picked up, but he's coming up. Darius Leonard's coming up. Xavier Rhodes is out there. T.Y. Hilton might get re-signed. There's a lot of players that Ballard's going to have to look at. And so, I mean, I probably lean closer to Kenny Galladay. So we'll kind of see where that one goes. Next up is Aiden. Aiden sent me the question of, should the Colts go for a quarterback if you don't keep Phillip Rivers for next season? Man, that's the biggest question. That's the biggest question across the board in Colts Nation right now. And if I had the answer, I would be doing Ballard's job. And I don't. I have no clue. And then you hear reports of like Zach Kiefer talking about, you have Jacob Eason saying, I'm going to be preparing like I'm going to start in 2021, which I absolutely love. I love that. I love when they drafted me, he said, I'm just going to go and basically work my nuts off this season. And he fully embraced the redshirt year. So I love that. I love him. And we're going to see what happens with that. Man, as far as kind of the biggest question out there is always going to be, what are they going to do because of Phillip Rivers? We talked about it earlier. And I've always kind of felt that Rivers is coming back unless he doesn't want to. And so the question's been floated way more since the end of the game because he was so emotional after the game. I mean, he was emotional last season, but y'all remember he was emotional because he knew he was leaving LA. He was leaving, San Diego. He was leaving the team that he had been with for 17 seasons. So he was really emotional. And he was really emotional after the loss and talking about how he bonded and he doesn't regret coming to Indy and all these things. And so there's a ton of questions on, does he retire? Now, if he retires, then your question's kind of answered. They've got to go in a different direction. You just don't know which way. Are they going to bring in a vet like a Sam Darnold? Because are they going to go after Justin Fields in the draft with the Jets? Are they going to look to try to maybe swindle a trade for Matthew Stafford? Or are they going to kind of package what they need and go up and get a quarterback in the draft like a Trey Lance? I floated it out because I do like him. There's no way they're going to package enough to get up and get Justin Fields. It's just kind of a fun thing that I do on Twitter. And that reminds me, you guys, if you don't follow me, find me at Forged in Blue. It's how you're going to interact. It's how you're going to see all kind of the fun little things that we do. Um, so, I mean, where do they go? Man, I don't know. Because, it's also reported with Zach Kiefer, too. He even said, Zach Kiefer and Stephen Holder on the 1% podcast even said, they've talked to people in the know, and they don't know what they're doing yet. So, I mean, I'm super interested. Thursday this week is Ballard's end of the year press conference, and he's so good in those. I mean, he gave like an hour and 15 minutes last year. He's so gracious with his time in those, and he gives information without giving information. So you really have to listen. But I mean, if I'm looking, I'm probably looking at least trying to get an idea of what the future holds. Because right now, all you have is Jacob Eason. And I know we all love the idea of Jacob Eason, but no one knows exactly what he's going to be able to do. So great question, man. I mean, we're going to find out way more as we get into the off season. But that was a great question. Scotty, a Colts guy, he sent me another one. And his question was, what do I think Ballard would do with the 21st pick in the draft? And what would I do? So what I think Ballard's going to do, there's always the possibility that he's going to trade back and acquire more picks if the talent's not there. I think the number one priority right now is probably going to be left tackle. There's some good ones in the draft that you can get at that pick. I think that's probably the way that I would go. But then again, I do get the desire of Colts fans to trade up. I think so much hinges on what Phillip Rivers does. If he retires, if he comes back, if he wants to come back, if the Colts want to move on. And thank God we'll get an answer to that kind of early in the offseason. So great question, Scotty. Scotty had another one. I'm going to get to it a little bit later. Chris Dubois, he asked me, Do you think the Colts fans that were calling for Touré's cut after his offsides call were justified in doing so? Good luck on the pod. Thank you, man. So no, I mean, it was a horrible, boneheaded play. I have a nephew who is a freshman in high school who plays at a local powerhouse school, and they don't do that. As you're watching the game, you see it coming, and you know they're not hiking the ball. And you don't know why he jumped off, and it was the biggest bonehead move, and it cost him 4 points because it would have been a field goal. It turned into a touchdown. But as far as justified for calling for him to be cut, absolutely not. The kid's got talent. The kid's flashed the talent. It was just a horrible mistake. No one called for D Ford 3 years ago with the Chiefs when he lined up offsides and cost them an AFC title. No one called for him to be cut. Now, granted, he's in San Francisco now. They did trade him, but I digress. So, I mean, no, you're not justified to call for a player to be cut because of that one mistake. And he rode the pine the rest of the game. So he kind of got what was going to happen. Um, Next up is TJ at Dope Savage. What would be the perfect offseason for the Colts, including the draft? Ooh, that is a really good question. Um, I think draft wise is to come out of it with a left tackle, some edge rush, and potentially a quarterback, depending on how you feel about Jacob Eason, a quarterback that you can have compete for either the 2021 starting spot, the 2021 backup spot. You can kind of do that. Um, and you can get this across the board. I mean, I don't know if you make the trade. A lot of people are talking about how the Colts are in win now mode right now, and they are. They have so much talent on their roster, and they are in win now. They it's tough. Do you take your lumps with a rookie? And that's going to be the biggest question all off season is what are they doing at quarterback until Philip Rivers makes up his mind on what he's going to do. That's going to be the biggest question. Um, but I think maybe I'd bring back T.Y. Hilton on a cap friendly, team friendly deal. He has said his next contract is his last. He wants to retire a Colt. I think they find a way to do that. He's too much of a veteran presence in that room. Um, I think probably Xavier Rhodes comes back. I think Anthony Walker probably walks because he talked about snap counts and wanting to be a starter. And Okereke kind of took that spot from him this year. And not saying rightfully so because I love Anthony Walker. But Okereke had a ton of speed and he's got a ton of talent and he's younger and he's got a lot of upside. So, I mean, if I'm looking at the perfect offseason, I think it's a blend of, bringing back some of your key guys, um, and tackling some of those positions in free agency, maybe bringing in a free agent wideout. And then, I mean, obviously, the number one thing is figuring out what you're going to do at quarterback going forward. What does the future look like? Is it Jacob Eason? Is he the guy? Is he, as Ballard quoted, he didn't call him this, but he kind of nixed it, is he the next Messiah in Indiana? We don't know. No preseason, no offseason, no real practice reps till the tail end of the year. No one really knows what we have in him. Um, is he the guy? Or are you going to trade? Are you going to trade for a Darnold? Are you going to trade for a Ryan? Are you going to go and get a Winston? I'm not including Deshaun Watson because it's not going to happen, you guys. We talked about that in the last episode. That's not happening. And I'm not going to include Carson Wentz anymore because, I've been on the Wentz train. Let me go on a little tangent for just a second before I get to the last question. I've been on the Wentz train. Y'all know I am on the Wentz wagon. I thought he would do really well here. He's not coming here now. And my tune kind of changed. I always felt that it was going to come down between him and the coach, and I feel like I can see it from a different perspective now of the Eagles probably coddled him, and they fired a Super Bowl winning coach 3 years removed from a Super Bowl to make Wentz happy, whether they say that or not. And that's a huge concern to me. So I don't think I'd want him here anymore. I don't know if he would mesh with what they do. And I don't think they're going to trade him anymore. They're going to bring in a coach who's going to work with him and hopefully revamp him. And so I don't think he's coming. So you've got a ton of different things that you have to figure out this offseason. But the number one thing is what the heck are you going to do going forward? A great stat about the quarterbacks was just like the age of the ones that are left are like all 25 and younger. The oldest one is Baker Mayfield. in the AFC. It's crazy. And we're sitting with the 39-year-old quarterback. And I think as great as he did this season, you have to figure out where you go next. So the last one, Scotty kind of snuck it into me this morning, was he had one more question for me. And that was with the QB situation looming, and now the left tackle, the needed draft capital for both positions. I think the Colts have to move Nelson over to left tackle. What are my thoughts? So Wright kind of touched on this, and he mentioned that it's something that might be discussed if Costanzo retired. I'm super hesitant with it, you guys. Nelson is off to the best career of a right guard in probably the history of the NFL. He is a 3-time All Pro. Okay. And he's never played left tackle. He did it sparingly. He did it a little bit, this year, but he's not a left tackle. He's a right guard. He's an 3-time All Pro right guard. Um, you make yourself weaker at your guard position to move him to left tackle. I don't like the idea of it because I feel like why would you make yourself weaker at two positions? Because you're going to be weaker at right guard, and he's not a left tackle, so you're going to be a little weaker at left tackle. So why weaken yourself across the board? I think you just have to go and you got to find the left tackle. You got to find the left tackle this offseason. You either got to make a trade, you got to draft one, you got to hope that it pans out, and you got to see what you can do with that. But I don't like the idea, really, Scotty, of moving him over just because he's so good at right guard. I mean, he's if he stays on the trajectory, he's going to be one of the greatest right guards of all time. He's going to be probably one of the greatest right guards in Colts history, and he's going to be a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer at right guard. So I don't really like the idea of it. So I mean, that's my feeling on that. You guys, I love Twitter time. I love it. When I send out the message and you find me at Forged in Blue, shoot me a question, DM it to me, find a way to get it to me. I hit it on the fleet, I hit it on the tweet, I do all of that stuff. I love getting them from you guys. I love getting them from anybody. You can be a Colts fan, you can be an Eagles fan, you can be a Patriots fan. We won't go that far. But you can be a different fan and you can send me questions. I don't care. I love interacting with you guys. I specifically do love interacting with Colts Nation, but you guys have to find me at Forged in Blue on Twitter to be able to interact. And we're just going to keep growing this, you guys. I love Twitter time. I love hearing from you guys. So keep them coming. Finally, you guys, let's look ahead to the Colts offseason. The Colts have a ton of big questions entering the offseason. We're going to just barely touch on them right now because it's so much stuff to talk about over the offseason, over the next couple of months, that it's going to kind of churn this pod. But some of the big questions, obviously, they're going to loom. You saw it in the Twitter time. You saw it kind of as you read articles. Is number one and foremost is the quarterback, and does Philip Rivers come back? That's a huge question. The second part of that is going to lend itself to the first part. Does Rivers decide he wants to come back, or does he want to retire and put a ball cap on and go coach some high schoolers down in the state of Alabama? If he says yes, he wants to come back, then I think it kind of stays chalk. Rivers is 1, Eason is 2. You draft a quarterback later and you let him duke it out, and then you go towards 2022, maybe a draft, maybe it's Eason at that point. If Rivers retires, things get a lot murkier, a lot quicker, and you get very interesting. Do you trade for a quarterback? Do you move up and draft a quarterback? Do you feel comfortable enough with Eason at this point to let him roll out there? So it's huge questions at the quarterback position. It's the most crucial position, as we all know, in the entire game of football. Probably in most sports, it's the number one position. There's a reason why they get paid $35, $45 million a year, because it's so important. And the Colts are right smack in the middle. I think one of the best things I saw was them talking about most of the time when a team is in need of a new franchise quarterback, they are rebuilding. The Colts are not. They are reloading, and they are right there, minus this one piece. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this offseason. The next big thing, obviously, is the news that broke on the 12th that Costanzo has officially retired. You knew it was kind of coming. You knew there was a possibility. We talked. If you listened to this pod, you knew I was something that I had mentioned previously that it was a worry because of kind of his mentality. He wasn't really sure if he was coming back last year, and he dealt with some pretty significant injuries this year. And like I've said previously, dude's just a different kind of cat. He's studying coding games and computer software out in Silicon Valley in the offseason. He's kind of like the Andrew Luck of the offensive line. He had so many interests outside of sports, and he was so unsure last year. And money's not an issue for him. He's made millions and millions of dollars playing this sport. Money's not an issue, just like with Andrew Luck. So it's just a matter of did he want to do it, and he doesn't want to do it. And you can't fault the guy. The guy's been a stud. We'll miss him. But now the question turns to what do you do to replace him? I think with a bullet, the number one thing for the offseason is going to be the left tackle situation, whether it's finding one in free agency or drafting one. I don't know who's out there quite yet. I got an idea. We're going to delve way more into that as the offseason goes on. But it's going to be a huge thing because whoever the quarterback is, they got to feel comfortable and they got to feel comfortable with their blind side. And so it's going to be really, I mean, that's a huge thing going to the offseason. Next thing for us is you got to get some sort of edge rush. The defense was great all season. But if you're going to nitpick, there was no pass rush most of the season. You got a ton of it up the middle from Grover Stewart and from Defoe, and Danico Autry did some, and Muhammad did some. Taekwon played well, but that's in the middle. You've got to have some edge. You've got to have the ability to get to the passer because that's how this defense operates. And the defense, y'all, let's jump on this real quick because this is another issue. You're going to have to replace probably some coaches. Eberflus is probably gone. You're probably going to have to replace Ed Dodd. He's probably gone too as a GM somewhere, and he deserves it. He's done fantastic. But you're going to probably have to replace those. But let's go ahead and get this out of the way. If Flus leaves, the system stays the same. Ballard likes the system. Irsay likes the system. Ballard is on record saying 3-4 teams don't win Super Bowls, 4-3 do. And he has helped build this defense on speed and rally to the ball. And so the defense is not going to change even if Flus is gone. So, I mean, you've got to figure out a way to get some rush. You can only get so many sacks from Leonard or from Kenny Moore or from Julian Blackman coming in. And you're not going to be able to rely on Justin Houston, I don't think. I don't think he comes back. I talked about that in Twitter time. So I don't think he comes back. So you've got to find a way to get some pass rush off the edge. It's the one thing I feel that the Colts were missing this season in regards to their overall defense. And there's just a ton of looming questions for a team that is right there, 11-5. Probably should have won the game. We talked about that earlier in the recap. Definitely the best game of the entire weekend. Should have been a primetime game. Don't know why the Colts don't get primetime games. Hopefully they do next year. We'll see. But it's so interesting for this offseason. I'm so excited to kind of delve into the first official offseason of the Forged in Blue podcast because there's every quarterback on the market is going to be linked to Indy. I literally said to one of my buddies that if I'm a quarterback and I'm either possibly going to get traded, get cut, or moved in some way, shape, I'm going to my agent. I'm saying, find a way to get me to Indy. Like, that's where I want to go. Everybody should want to go to Indy. You have a stud in the backfield in Jonathan Taylor. You have developing weapons on the outside. You have one of the best O-lines in the game. And you have a defense that you can lean on. Who wouldn't want to go play? That's probably why Rivers is trying to figure out if he wants to come back. He was one of the least sacked quarterbacks. So, I mean, it's so interesting. And you're going to get some of those answers pretty quickly. Rivers is going to decide if he's coming back. He's going to get away for a couple of weeks. We're not going to hear anything. And then he'll make a decision. And when he makes the decision, the dominoes will fall the other way. They'll fall on what they're going to do. And you're going to know pretty quickly how they feel about certain players. You're going to know how they feel about Eason's development. You're going to know how they feel about the quarterbacks on the draft. You're going to kind of get an idea of these different things. So, I mean, it's such an interesting offseason, you guys, that I'm so excited to talk about it on here. So find me, like I said in Twitter time, find me at Forged in Blue. Let's interact. Let's keep in touch throughout the offseason because I'm still going to keep dropping these episodes, and it's going to be super interesting this offseason. Okay, you guys, we've come to the portion of the pod where, as always, I like to thank all of Colts Nation and all of my listeners. Man, I could have never imagined all the way back on December 4th when I popped out the first intro to Forged in Blue podcast, fumbling through it, trying to figure out what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say, trying to create these segments, that it would ever reach the level in my mind over that span that it is right now. And I love you guys so much for just embracing it and letting me kind of roll with this and learn as we go and try to get better and develop these segments like Dagum players or show up and show out or keys to a Colts victory or Twitter time. I love them all. And I love that you guys love them. And so I'm so thankful for you guys wrapping your arms around this and just embracing it the way you guys have. I also want to touch on really quickly too, if you want to interact with me, find me at Forged in Blue on Twitter. Hit me with a DM. At me. However you want to interact. I'm all about interacting with Colts Nation. I'm all about interacting with other NFL fan bases. It's how you're going to figure out where your team sits. What better way than to talk to other fans as well, or other podcasts, or other anything. So, I love that too. Just a really quick update for you guys too as we head into the offseason. The topics, they're plentiful, but at the same time, odds are more than likely with this podcast, I'm going to probably drop one a week, maybe around midweek for you guys, until obviously we get a little closer to free agency, maybe to the draft, to the training camp, and then into next season. So, look for that. We're going to drop them, probably once a week, may do a special episode here and there. And between those, leading into when it gets a little bit more chaotic and a little bit more busy in the off season. So, all in all, you guys, it was such a fun season, such a tail end of the season for me to be able to talk to you guys. I love it so much. And remember, you guys, win, lose, or draw, we are all forged in blue. I'll talk to y'all next time.